Last year, you guys will probably remember we introduced the intersection between legal operations and e-discovery, and my kids thought I said legal pops instead of legal ops. And this year, my son, as he was shoveling the 26 inches of snow in the front yard, said, "Dad, I'm really excited about this legal ops conference that you're going to." I said, "Well, it's legal ops and e-discovery," but I said, "We're going to also introduce AI." And he looked at me and he said, "Dad, do you think AI could help me shovel this 26 inches of snow?" And he was onto something, right? And so I think you're going to learn a lot about that today. I'd love to introduce my esteemed panel, and I'll start out with Kelly, and we'll work our way back this way.
Yes, good morning. I'm Kelly Mickelson. I have the privilege of leading legal operations at Mars, which is the candy, gum, mint, pet care, Pringles, Eggo, all the loving brands, the brands that you've come to love over the years. I was asked to give a 60-second explanation of what legal ops is, just to be sure that we're meeting all of our audience members where we'd like them to be. At Mars, legal ops is defined as about 5 things I am accountable for, together with my small and mighty team. All of our digital transformation, all of our intellectual property operations, all of our litigation support, all of our outside counsel portfolio, and finally, keeping us on budget and plan.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Nima Adabi. I'm a partner at Kirkland & Ellis in the litigation group, where I focus my practice on e-discovery strategy. I also have the pleasure of serving on the executive committee for the State Bar of Georgia's e-discovery section.
Hello, everyone. My name is Val Charles Pierre. I'm the head of e-discovery at Goldman Sachs, and this is my very first UF conference, so I'm really excited about it.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Harsha Kirpad. I'm an antitrust e-discovery counsel at Latham & Watkins. As the title implies, I focus most of my time on antitrust issues. It's my second time here. It's an honor to be here, and this is a wonderful conference.
So I want to go back to something I said earlier about my son, and I forgot to mention that he wanted to be paid for it as well. But he was onto something, and I think we're going to talk a lot about one of the things that I love about this conference is the takeaways, right? And what we're going to learn today is the time equals value proposition, and I think he really leaned into that quite a bit there, right? Like, how is AI going to help me get this done faster so I can come back to my video games? We're going to have some real examples. We're going to have a reminder on governance. We talk about responsibility when it comes to AI, approaches to setting guidelines, how law firms and corporations are working together in the framework. But Kelly, as Aiden so succinctly put it, he wanted AI to shovel the driveway. So tell us a little bit about where he was smart enough to get us to think on the time equals value proposition.
You bet. This is not anything special to Mars, and it's certainly not anything special to corporate legal departments. This is true in any job, in any company or government office that I'm aware of, which is there's too much work and too few people to do it. The cavalry is not coming. It is especially not coming now in terms of more lawyer headcount or even more legal operations professionals, right? We are being asked to do work at a different pace with the tools that we now have, right? That actually, for the first time ever, in my opinion, actually state the proof point for how we're going to get there. We are already using, and you'll hear many of us talk about this today, we're going to give you very specific examples of where we are using generative AI or agentic AI technology to scale our fairly still lean Mars legal department, or law firms, corporate legal departments in my case, for a $60 billion company that just acquired a $40 billion company, right? I can't add 200 more lawyers or even 10 more lawyers to make that happen, right? And so this is the actual examples of technology we will be talking about today and sharing with you that are live are the ways in which we are surviving this absolutely exponential increase in demand with no new headcount. In fact, our budgets are decreasing in the coming years, right? Which I'm also accountable for driving. So come with us over the next couple of minutes. The next slide, I believe, talks about all the different ways in which we actually do already find the value proposition using AI. Kanan, back to you, good sir.
Yes, and I will say this, and I did use AI to come up with this, but I do want to say that before we get into our views and opinions, they're expressed by these panelists. They're their own, and they do not necessarily reflect the views, positions, or policies of their respective organizations or employers or affiliates. Again, thank you to AI for that. I would say this, coming to Val from the perspective of how AI is delivering cost savings from where we are today. Like what did that look like, and what does that transition look like for you a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. With regards to cost savings, there are certain like AI applications that are pretty like turnkey that we're comfortable like leveraging now, right? Such would be Privlog generation. Also, we're looking into leveraging AI in terms of like scoping for internal investigations, right? Is there a dare there, right? So like looking at the data set, being able to query it, ask it questions, have the ability to identify key players and ask follow-up questions. We feel that exponentially like formulates legal strategy from the onset, right? So it's initiating more proactive scoping as opposed to reactive review.
Well, oftentimes it's said, and from my former years as an in-house counsel, that legal is a bottleneck, right? And maybe how, from your perspective, Val and Kelly, being in-house, how AI has helped you enhance that. And we'll talk a little bit about examples from both, but maybe how you've heard over the years that, legal slows everything down, legal is the bottleneck. Like, how is AI helping you enhance?
Definitely with its ability to cut through like vast voluminous data, right? With the ability to cluster thematically like documents, and then also leveraging AI along with like our regular e-discovery like workflows and surfacing up on what we would like to review ahead of time. And then, obviously introducing validation sets to it, and then getting to a point where we can look at the remaining data and then, feel comfortable with not having to review it.
Yeah, and Kelly, maybe you can share a little bit, and then we can get into Legal Beagle.
Yeah, well, for me, the answer is simply data. We don't need stories about who the bottleneck is. All we have to do is look at the data, right? And so when you actually bring work in the right way via like a legal intake system or a legal front door, you spot the work, you see where the work is going, you see how long the work took. The stories quickly evaporate, right? When you show, nope, actually it's not legal, the bottleneck in this, right? It was trapped up with procurement for 6 weeks on a contract to get the deal done, right? Whatever the case may be, we're not looking to place blame. We're actually looking to understand the objective data and the reasons why we might be slower to outcome than anyone would want.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, just from the law firm side, maybe you can share a little bit about the early onset. I mean, AI, I think, has been around for quite some time, and it's not anything that's new, but how is this impacting you all?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's impacting us because of our clients, right? Our clients are now very much so savvy into the use of generative AI in the practice of law and on the business application side. And they've gotten to the point where they're expecting that from their outside counsel. And I think aligning with your clients as a good partner means that you are going to not only leverage generative AI, but find ways to help them out using generative AI for their day-to-day practice as well, too.
And Harsha, I think from the, obviously as your title says antitrust, but you do a lot of other work, and e-discovery is the core of it. How for you is that?
I mean, I think Nima is 100% right in the sense that, like, I can envision a future where our clients are going to come to us in our engagement letters and say, hey, you have to use AI for X, Y, and Z, or something like that. And I think we're seeing it not just in e-discovery, but in all these other sort of things in litigation, whether it's trying to kind of predict which way a judge is going to go in a given motion, or summarizing deposition transcripts, or sort of the routine stuff of like ROG responses, RFPs, like all that kind of stuff. And what I'm starting to see is some real efficiency. Like, we can free up all of our senior resources to do the stuff that senior resources ought to be doing, as opposed to slogging their way through all these types of documents. And I also think that, like, in terms of my practice on the antitrust side, we are starting to see increasingly that even before you get to the HSR phase, where you're starting to say, like, hey, do these two companies want to merge? getting data, using AI to query it to see if there's like deal-killing documents or very pro-competitive documents in that set. Because, you know, in this current regulatory regime, you know, all the uncertainties and what have you, you're starting to see merging parties with like really spicy deals. And so being able to suss this out on the front end to say, hey, is this going to be viable? Will the DOJ or FTC completely shut us down? Is incredibly powerful. And I think that AI has a really big role in that.
And I'm seeing a lot of that time value proposition, right? The earlier you can get to the data, the earlier you can figure out whether it's a litigation or whether it's a contract to figure those things out. And Kelly, dare I say, you're one of the most innovative legal operations directors I know. Would love for you to share with the audience of 4,500 people a little bit about Legal Beagle.
You bet. He's a cute little fellow, isn't he? That image, by the way, was created by Microsoft Copilot, and he didn't look professional enough, so I had him add a tie and a nice pair of spectacles, and boom, Mars Legal Beagle was born. So here's the really quick story. I believe most companies and corporate legal departments have a challenge with knowledge management. That is the tacit knowledge and the written knowledge that is the corpus of knowledge assets that a corporate legal department owns. We were about to welcome, again, you've just heard me say, we invited our the Kellanova business, which was another 40,000 employees and a good number of other lawyers, to come into the Mars culture and to learn the Mars way and to find the best of both, right? That means that they actually have to be able to know how the Mars legal department handles issues, has policies about this or that, and that isn't by tapping on Harsha and saying, how do we do this at Mars? That is an unacceptable, slow, inefficient way of handling knowledge management in 2026, right? It was unacceptable. And so I went to a Microsoft Copilot AI day. In 30 minutes, I learned how to create a Microsoft Copilot Studio agent. P.S. I'm not a technologist. I did grow up in technology, but I don't code. This is a no-code agent builder. I simply created the Mars Legal Beagle agent. It is an agent that lives in Microsoft Teams, next to where you'd find Harsha and all of the other people you might otherwise ask about Mars knowledge. And you simply engage with the Mars Legal Beagle. The Mars Legal Beagle is only allowed to use Mars Legal Department knowledge to return its answers, and it does so every day with citations, right? Because we have lawyers, human in the loop, responsible AI, that they must verify the information that it's current, it's accurate, etc. When there are knowledge gaps, the agent refuses to answer. I look at the queries that come in, the output that comes out, and I say, oh, we've got a gap. Nobody knows how to handle, co-manufacturer packaging down in Egypt, right? Well, we got to fix the knowledge gap because there's 10 people that have been asking about it last week. This has completely transformed the way our lawyers have shared knowledge. It's also completely transformed the way we flowed talent. I just wanted to hit on that. It's not all about dollars and cents and efficiency. But today, if you've got a really talented lawyer that works in the pet care division in Belgium and that a lawyer really wants to go be promoted, nobody really wants that lawyer and his or her brain to leave. And sometimes you make the wrong decision to hold somebody back, or you risk making the wrong decision to hold somebody up because you can't imagine doing the work without them. Here comes Legal Beagle, right? As long as the knowledge has been stored in a reasonable way, the agent grabs it. It's not just to go find and go fetch little Beagle, right? This is true generative AI, right? Mars Legal Beagle, I have a factory site visit coming, and I need to make sure that my factory site manager is handling the guest guidelines correctly. Write an email to the site manager that actually shows what our policies are and what not to do. It does that for them in 60 seconds, and they're off to the next, much more strategic legal matter. So this has shaved thousands of hours of time off of our legal associates' work, and we're very excited about the promise of what this then will bring to, guess what, then to the business, right? This is the next step, which is, what can we allow the business to use these agents for so that the high volume, low risk questions that come into their inboxes instead come to an agent to be answered firstly still allowing the lawyers to do all of that high strategic work that we already mentioned.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about that is what you said is it hasn't reduced the number of people, it's made them more efficient.
Oh,
right?
yes, amplified their output, yes.
We'll
And this
talk-
is pennies on the dollar, right? It doesn't actually cost anything to build this agent and deploy the agent. So it's near zero cost.
I just think there's always this fear, right? That we'll talk a little bit about risk mitigation. We'll talk a little bit about the fear-based aspect of this. But when you think about how AI is making people more efficient, Val, I'd love to hear from your perspective at Goldman Sachs what kind of things you guys are doing.
Yeah, Kelly hit the nail on the button, right? High value, low risk, repetitive actions, right? And that's where you really want to leverage AI to the best of your capabilities, right? So one of the the use cases that we're doing at Goldman as well, and it's public knowledge, we have GS AI Assist, and that is our own internal AI application that allows everyone to leverage the power of AI for their particular use case, right? And I think that really breeds innovation in terms of giving folks ownership of their work product and how they can free up their time in order to increase efficiencies and ultimately reduce cost spend and making us more strategic. One of the things that we're also looking in terms of the application of AI is, and in-house will love this, external counsel may not, but it's cost spend, right? Legal cost spend, right? Having the ability to look at all of our invoices across all of our matters, across all of our external counsels that we have, and really leveraging AI to digest and synthesize that information to really identify inefficiencies or things that we could be doing better, or also having the ability to say, hey, we have external counsel doing this low-level work at X amount, and we can leverage our alternative service providers to do the same thing, right? But then also having, in-depth conversations with external counsel and our vendors and how that looks like and what the guidelines look like.
And I think I've said this for 18 years in my career, that the alternative legal service providers where I've worked, the in-house counsel and the lawyers need to work more closely together and think about what services each one needs to provide. And I think the corporations are forcing that a little bit more on the law firms now and saying, look, can the ALSP help us with depot prep or some of these things? On your point about the legal billing, I think it's interesting because I know that a lot of law firms are using that now to create their verbiage for their time entries, right? So I wonder how e-billing matter management tools will play back and forth. But I think what you also probably see, Val, is what is being done, and out of all of the different law firms providing services to Goldman Sachs, what type of services are being provided, and can we put that into one place to see what we actually are outsourcing, right?
Sorry. Yeah, so in terms, what we've done as well is we've reached out to all of our external counsels and really started to survey their practical use cases, right? And really having discussions with associates in terms of how they use AI. And, not one associate is not the same as the other, right? So we've had conversations where associates leverage AI to create draft outlines, right? And then perform and execute their work product in that manner. And then we've also had associates have it create the drafts for them and then tweak and tie, right? And then trying to have conversations in terms of what works best and what that outlook looks like.
Well, there's a lot of loyalists too. I think you've got first and second year associates who are now 15 years later in-house counsel and remember how important it is to have a first and second year associate do some of that work. So we're playing.
One thing I was going to add is it also builds consistency, right? If you have a platform that is assisting you do all of this, your work product is going to be consistent across your organization. And I think that's, one, builds efficiency and cost savings, but two, it also builds credibility because you're not going to ever see this kind of up and down in terms of the work product.
And where, I guess, Nima, Harsha, from the law firm perspective, where is AI delivering the most in real efficiency for you all?
I mean, personally, I find it helpful for me when I'm trying to write communications out externally to clients. I tend to like to put in a lot of detail when I'm delivering a message to a stakeholder. And I'm just for a place I've always wanted to know everything so I can make a good informed decision. However, if you're dealing with somebody who's at the C-suite level, that individual does not have the time to go look through like a 1-page or 2-page email. So I leverage, like, for example, Harvey to help me be a little more brief, to help me kind of synthesize the information in a way that is going to be digestible quickly by somebody at that level. And I think it just helped me reduce time in my being able to draft communications that are going to ultimately impact decisions for the case, whether it's internal or external. And we looked towards using it in practice. So Kelly brought up the Mars Kellanova case. I helped out on that case. I worked on the European Commission's Phase 2 investigation, which is like a second request, but in the EU. And we, just like how a HSR second request is here, lots of volume of information that needs to be synthesized in a very short period of time. And given the complexity of the issues, and that you're also talking about a different continent's laws and whatnot, we were looking quickly to solutions to help us out to not to be only better efficient from a billing perspective, but to be able to actually meet these deadlines. And we started investigating using generative AI for descriptions on a privilege log. And Kelly hinted at this earlier, as we were working through that solution, we quickly realized that we have to get approval from the client to do that. And once we started the application process, it was amazing because I think the stakeholders in the legal team were not aware that it was going to take so long in-house. And as we went through this process, we started realizing that, oh my gosh, I don't think it's going to be approved fast enough for us to leverage it. And I think the lesson learned for me, and I think for everybody working on that deal, is if you upfront see a tool that you're going to leverage that incorporates generative AI, not only check to see if the client's going to approve it, but you need to kind of understand what the approval process is and get that started right away. So, I mean, it's been very helpful, but I also think that practical applications of it requires a lot of foresight before you actually want to actively engage it.
Yeah, and really quick before we come back to Harsha, Kelly, any thoughts on that? Obviously, you were involved in that.
That's why we're only using Microsoft Copilot. The security posture that we already enjoy in the M365 environment, again, somebody already mentioned where all the emails are already stored, we are already familiar with this, we are already comfortable with this. I do not have the time to procure a Harvey, a Legora. There are literally hundreds of new entrants into this market for legal tech-specific AI, and I am not in the position to chase nearly any of them. Right, which is why we're going with a more than good enough solution for today to get us to speed to outcome, and it's working beautifully.
And just briefly, we do have a question, but I want to come back to Harsha after. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
This is an online question that's gone viral. As a matter of fact, it's going up and up and up. So, and it has to do with law firm transparency with clients on the use of AI.
I thought it was going to be how much I paid my son.
It says that Florida actually provides templates through the Florida Bar that are consent forms that attorneys can give to clients regarding using generative AI. Do you have agreements to the extent that you can share information here today, or other kinds of discussions with clients about whether and to the extent you're using Gen AI and other kinds of machine learning technologies?
I mean, I think so. Most of the law firms that that we all know and work with, they're advertising openly. Hey, we brought Harvey in-house. We brought XYZ in-house. I mean, it's not. I mean, part of it's marketing, but it's also, I think, I would imagine, I haven't seen this personally, but like it's probably in our engagement letters, right? We're saying, hey, we're going to be using this, that, and the other. So that way we're kind of covering ourselves. I think the biggest issue there, and I think we'll get into this a little bit more too, is using sanctioned programs. In other words, don't put like client data out into the wild in like ChatGPT. Use Harvey because it's behind our firewall. Like that kind of stuff, like the InfoSec part of it, I think is also a big component of this. But yeah, I think, is our clients, at least on the e-discovery side, are absolutely expecting us to use this. I mean, TAR has been here for what, 20-something plus years. Like they know that about that stuff. But then, with the EDAIs of the world, the relativity errors of the world, like, we make it a point to say to the client, like, hey, these tools may be in play. Is it part of the vendor contract that we're working with? Like, so that way we try to be as upfront about it as possible. So there are no surprises. Like, I do not want in-house counsel to give me a nasty phone call saying, why are you using this? Like that kind of thing. Is that sort of answering the question?
Yeah, I think it is, but there also you're dealing with lawyers that have all kinds of different clients, and some may be AI averse, and some may want it, and so the bar is trying to give ways to deal with this with your clients, and so we just wondered if you had anything in particular that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think transparency, right? Like, like when we were contemplating using it in this deal, as soon as it came as up as an option and the need was there, we right away talked to our client, right, and said, "What are your thoughts about this?" And our client was on board, pending approval through their process, right? So I think transparency is it's key, right? And there are going to be organizations that are adverse, and that's fine. That conversation will set the expectations, and then you can explain what the alternative routes are if you cannot use the tools that you want to do at your disposal to be more efficient.
I also think organizations are starting to take a proactive approach in terms of having conversations with external counsel about these things, right? Just from a data governance and transparency perspective, yes, you guys are using Harvey, but in what manner and what are the controls surrounding that application? Is that closed off? How is our data protected, right? And understanding the cyber security engineering component. So we work closely with our tech risk department in terms of, reaching out to external counsel to understand their environment and its implications on whether or not, we're comfortable with them using our data. So we have like a questionnaire or two and have them fill out, and that will give us some sort of comfort in terms of that use case.
I've seen a lot of pursuit requests, not only to us, but to outside counsel saying, if you're going to use AI, how are you going to use it, and give us some feedback. And whether they want to ever use that or not, they're utilizing that to gain information. Bill, do you have a question?
I'm just wondering, in terms of efficiency, I think we've all talked about AI enablement to increase efficiency, but I wonder if you're detecting any change in the dynamic between the internal law firm, the in-house counsel, and outside counsel. In other words, there has been some speculation that more work is going to go inside, and that essentially what's going to happen is inside counsel is going to be sending litigators, God forbid, packages of material to vet and to use. So you're going to have kind of a shift in who's doing what work as a result of the advent of generative AI, which kind of cuts, Kelly, against your point earlier, that you have fewer and fewer people. So I just was wondering if you're seeing any dynamic changing, or it's still basically when you have litigation, a significant chunk of that or an important part of that still goes to outside counsel to work on almost from the start.
May I take it really quick?
Sure.
Thank you. My chief legal officer would say thank you for your question, because we are spending far too much with outside counsel. Sorry, guys. We are absolutely insourcing more work here, and the trend or the theme that you just alluded to is happening. We are keeping more work in-house, and we will hire more lawyers when necessary to avoid the $3,400 an hour partner headlines that have just crossed the...
Everyone, I think, saw that article. Let me also say this. I think just for a plug to all of the ALSPs that are out there working more closely with the in-house counsel and the law firms, and for law firms to take notice of this too, like it is now more of a partnership than it's ever been, right? And the ALSPs are creating all of these different LLMs and all these other different models to help and support, but it's across the board, right, from an efficiency perspective. There was another question here too.
But before that question, I just
Yeah.
want to mention that we have wonderful AI-enabled graduates that want to work at ASCs and corporations.
And we
So
need
please
them.
come and talk to us.
We need them.
I wanted to add one thing to that real quick. So Judge Purcelli last year sat here and spoke about how for his future clerks, you could require them, or at least in the application, disclose if they're willing to or know how to prompt for Gen AI. And not that they're using it to publish decisions, but that it's a tool for vetting, for the purposes of his work and whatnot. And he finds it. So I don't think it's just a law firm and an in-house counsel proposition. I think it is the entirety of the practice, wherever you sit, whether it's on the side of on the judicial side or on the side of a law firm or in-house.
And maybe next year on this panel, we'll add a judge, but this
I'm over here.
nice gentleman has been waiting.
Hi, my name is David Gaston. I am a CAIO as well as lead technology counsel. I put those points out there for my question to make sense. I'm building processes in Copilot as well. I'm building a lot of the automation type tools, sometimes by myself, but sometimes with help. But yep, I heard you when you said, like, I know exactly what you did. And actually, this is where my question comes around, which is when you are developing your beagle or your eagle or any sort of animal that you want to make the AI less scary for your charges to, how are you curating the information that you're telling the LLM to go to? Are you looking at it based on matter? Are you how are you finding the A answers? Are you looking for A answers? Are you throwing everything in there? Where's the curation component? I'm not suggesting you're not doing it. I'm curious what it might be.
Yeah, David, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, nice to meet you, David. May I quickly? We're going with a safe enough to try lens. A answers are interesting. I'm not sure that we think about that in that specific of a way. I'll answer your question much more helpfully here in just a second. I could build the agent. Anyone in this room can build an agent in Copilot Studio in 30 minutes and deploy it. Your point is exactly right. The agent is only as good as the information atop, that it's sitting atop. And so I went out and I did rally hours. I expressly called them that. And I said, hey, employment team, I need an hour with you. I want to understand the work that you just did over the last 6 months, the big matters that you worked on, the big advice and counsel you hired. I want all that, and I want it to sit here, right? This is bringing stuff out of the tacit knowledge area and getting it to checklists or a couple of templates or whatever. It's all stored on a SharePoint site. It is not heavily curated. I love your word. We don't have fancy knowledge manager roles whose job it is to go out and ensure accuracy, currentness, deprecation of different versions. We talk about that, but it's no one's job. So again, it's not maybe A+ kind of stuff, right? But when the lawyer or the paralegal finds that the agent is delivering knowledge that's stale, inaccurate, gaps, whatever, that's where we have the obligation and the accountability to then report it back to the group that we think that can cure that gap. And then we fix, we get back to doing well to make it more likely that we get the A answer the next time.
The follow-up question, that hits it. The follow-up question would be, are there refresh intervals to putting additional information in there in order to say, hey, red is blue now or blue is green now, and so that those changes are incorporated within the beagle.
Yes, yeah, that's all right. Eagle, beagle. There's a contract Yoda out there. I mean, everyone's kind of got their own.
I mean, I love animals. I can go all day.
Yeah. Yes, that actually, I would probably say, and then I'll turn it back to my esteemed colleagues here, that actually is the hardest part of all of this. No one thinks, Mars nailed knowledge management in the summer of 2025 because we were getting ready to invite 40,000 new Kellanova associates to join us. And guess what? The work is never done. This is your point, right? So there are campaigns that I run for the full legal department that require people to kind of come back in and refresh, right? Your blue becomes red, whatever your analogy was. We don't have it nailed. I certainly don't want to overstate our maturity in this area, but yes, there are by design campaigns across the legal department, and importantly with our legal professionals. We don't call them non-lawyers, right? But our paralegals and all of the other folks, right? Whose job it is to go help make this curation be A-level stuff. Yep.
And David, I think the slide behind me is important, right? In terms of that curation and the emphasis on governance, right? So again, well, not necessarily, because in terms of optimization and drift detection, recalibration, and like having that ability to constantly look and monitor and refresh that information, that's part of the governance component to it.
Notice the winding road. I'm gonna shift to something else. So if this question is on where we are now, great.
It is actually, it's a sort of an other side of the coin question, which is very interesting from the audience, again, gaining support. How does the firm using AI ensure that young associates, these are the new people coming in that you're grooming with this, are learning the real legal skills that they need to develop as lawyers and not excessively relying upon their AI to their personal detriment? Do you view this as a new problem or part of the larger problem of prioritizing the short-term gain?
That person
I
should get
can
an
answer that.
MVP award.
Graduates
right
from University of Florida, Levin College.
Go ahead. Harsha.
It's a very valid concern. I've had some presentations of AI at the firm, and I've gotten that question, and I always tell them, like, look, you are being hired for your legal judgment. Clients are paying a boatload of money to get your opinion, right? So if you want to use AI here and there to sort of mold or fashion that opinion, that's fine, but don't get lazy on this, right? Because at some point you're gonna progress in your legal career, and if you're just using this as a crutch, you're not gonna know what you're doing when Kelly comes to you and says, hey, I've got this problem, how do we solve it, right? And I think, I always tell my the folks I work with, I'm like, coming to me and saying AI said this is never going to be an acceptable answer. You know what I mean? Like, use it as however, in whichever way it makes sense for you. But I want your varnished your legal opinion. I do not want something that I can just look up myself on Harvey just playing around with it.
And you get that via experience, right?
Exactly.
So like the lawyers that are there today, and that's why I said the first and second year attorney is at some point will be the 15-year in-house counsel and say, oh, I really do respect what the first and second year attorney has to say from a diversity of thought. But Nima.
It's important to drive the thought home with students and with lawyers that are coming out into practice as first, second years, that this is a tool.
Exactly.
It's not supposed to replace your ability to think and make good judgment calls, be able to solve problems. I mean, it might be something to help with some of the steps, but you can't just rely on it, right? You have to have safeguards, and you have to know what you're doing with that tool to get the results that you want. And a part of that is understanding the process. Like, and a good analogy of this is, I mean, although it's way more sophisticated than going from the way we used to do research out of books into Westlaw, that happened, right? And we all are still employed. We're all still doing legal research and whatnot. And this is just another tool to throw in a universe of cases that are coming in where the complexity is growing, but also just from an e-discovery lens, the volume of data, the corpus of universal data is expanding exponentially by the second as we sit here and talk. This is just another tool to throw at.
And by the way, AI is helping in that tremendously, right? Yeah. And I want to shift. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to shift to where Val was going with regards to how do you enable this innovation without increasing the risk, right? And I think a lot of our clients are saying, I'm going to release Copilot. I had a client say, I released Copilot to 34,000 people. We forgot to have a records retention policy. And I almost lost it right then and there because I'm like, well, now you're going to have terabytes upon terabytes upon terabytes of data of the data you already have created, right? And so take us through this winding road.
Yeah, no, definitely, right? So in terms of the focus of AI enablement, right, we really need to define acceptable use cases for one. And that's by serving our clients, our stakeholders, having the ability to have data classifications, access restrictions, always making sure, right, we have a human in the loop, right? Trust but validate, right? And really having discussions with our our vendors and external counsel in terms of what their security protocols are, understanding the output, the benchmarking of that output, sampling our protocols, having QA protocols in place, and then also just understanding the regulation as well as it pertains to AI, right? So AI increases efficiency if done right, but if done wrong, it also increases risk, right? And we have to be really cognizant of that.
Yeah. Kelly, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I honor all that my good friend Val's just said, and I think that, like, let's take the Mars Legal Beagle for example. There's nothing that the Beagle can do that will make worse the way we were already working, right? Which was, you didn't even know that we hired 3 different firms in North America to ask the same or similar question last month, and P.S. they all answered it differently. Like, that happens, right? That's the law. It is not black and white, right? So oftentimes advice and counsel does come back differently. And so if the agent, this good old little Beagle, goes and fetches that and exposes it to the lawyer using it, I don't care if it's 100% perfect and good old Charles with yes, no, David, shoot, yes, whoever you are. The gentleman with the wonderful questions, that it's an A answer, because you know what, we might have been C's or D's before. But if I can get, for me, it is all about speed to first draft, speed to first answer, speed to understanding the scoping of the issue, right? Everything else, somebody said to me the other day, like, well, I've been using Copilot to go review all of the different exceptions we've given for sanctions in Russia. And I run the search and it gives me the answer back. And I feel like I spend hours verifying that it's right. And that feels like it's not any more efficient. I said, well, do you mind if I ask you how you would have done it without the tool then? Well, I would have spent hours looking and I probably would have missed things. Well, yes. Yeah. Like, use the agent, get you 80, 90, something north of 50% of the way there, and then apply that strategic thinking, the human in the loop thinking to close it. I mean, we are shaving, again, thousands of hours off of the time lawyers are taking to find and get to first draft in a good enough way, and then putting their strategic thinking hats back on and getting going.
And I think it goes back to the question that the audience was asking, right? How, trust but verify has been true in e-discovery forever, but I think for AI, it's like doubly true. And as the technology gets better, I suspect it's going to be more difficult to figure out when it's hallucinating. And so that's where that human judgment, that's where we need our junior attorneys and mid-levels and our senior, all up and down the ranks to be able to suss that out and say, hey, this doesn't smell right. This doesn't feel right. That kind of stuff. So there's always going to need to be the junior associates or what have you, who can just do the human smell test and figure out, like, is this correct?
Can I say one last thing about contracting? I'm not sure if anybody is in the hell of contract lifecycle management and contracting and understanding what is in the corpus of your contracts, right? This is probably the single heaviest thing confronting most mega multinationals, right? Which is, we don't do contracting well. We don't do it efficiently. You don't even have to buy a bespoke legal technology program to tomorrow know what's in your contracts better. Microsoft SharePoint has a new feature called autofill column, and it's AI enabled, but you simply load like 5,000 contracts, supplier contracts, indirect procurement contracts, and in a matter of seconds, it actually presents them for you in a tabular review type of way, where you can very easily see, like, well, these 6 have a limitation of liability that's far too low or too high, whatever, right? Like, this is, the risk is, I just feel I could be unpopular maybe in a group of, in a profession that is fairly conservative, but I think the risk of not knowing is far worse than starting out with an agent like a situation and at least starting to understand what's in your material, what's in your knowledge.
I agree. We've got one question, and then I want to give you guys a call to action. So,
I will say that this is probably the thing that scares me the most about AI. Is this, we kind of talked about it again and again and again. It's like, it looks so confident. It looks so believable. It writes like a PhD. And somebody gives you a system and they're like, yeah, let's go organize 10,000 documents, right? And then you just say, hey, this is what I want. And you look at the first 10 and they look great.
Sure.
But then what if it missed something on the 15th? What if it hallucinated something? How do you balance the ease and the zero friction from the inevitable problems? I look, everybody, there are lots of discovery professionals in here. Everybody has at some point had an AI system pre LLM completely lie to them, right? It's a world. I don't know. I've got like 10 scars. I'm so paranoid about this. Like, how do you guys navigate that?
Let me ask you this question. So for those of you who practice on the law firm side, when you have an associate do research for you or write a brief or get you to a point in an outline, how many of you actually just trust what they say, that they say the case says this? Many of you probably do, but many of you also probably, if you're doing what you're supposed to do as a principal on a matter or running a certain process, you need to go look at the case and make sure that it's actually saying what they're saying, one, and two, that it's still good law. Well, it's the same thing here, right? When you're getting results out of a tool like this, you have to, like we said, trust but verify, right? The verification of it is what's important. Now, in some instances, like you said earlier in your example, like somebody might complain that the time I'm spending to verify was the same as me just doing the work. And that
I dispute that.
Right. Yeah. That's not
Completely.
true, right? But my point is you still have to verify after all of this. And I think to your example, you're saying when you get something that's a lie that comes out or something that's a misstated out of an AI tool, well, that goes back to the person who's who's doing the work, right? They should be doing the diligence to make sure that those results are actually accurate or what they're relying on is accurate.
So Val, let's do a little bit of a call to action. We typically give you takeaways. We're going to give a little bit of a challenge. So why don't we lean in here and...
Yeah, so I think the AI maturity model is going to be how you operationalize it, right, and govern it, right? So I hear a lot of reservations about its output, but if you put in workflows and checks and balances in order to provide guidance in its output, then we'd feel a lot more comfortable than that, right? So let's think about working towards operationalizing it and the governance surrounding it so we can have a better level of comfort in its use.
Yeah, and I think, Kelly, you did this call to action very well, right? It's pick 2 or 3 use cases, go from experimentation to execution. I think a lot of our clients, for instance, will say, sure, if you can help me generate a priv log as a first pass, we're going to verify it. Or opposing production comes in, it's full of garbage, let's prompt it, right? Those are easy ways to utilize a tool. But I think you've really given a good example, and maybe it's the legal beagles challenge to all of our listeners here, right? Of dip your toe in, work through it, verify, and really give it a try, right? And I think
Just have to start, yeah. If the wrong person was sitting in my role, they would have been bullied by all of the others to say, well, you've got to have all the right taxonomy, and you've got to have all of the right naming structures, and you've got to have all of the right refresh periods. And then we'd literally still be sitting here debating how we will do knowledge management better. I said, I don't care about mostly all of that. We're just starting, right? Like, we just have to begin.
Yeah, and it's one of the major reasons why I love this conference more than any other, right? We're here to educate. We're here to have these key takeaways. I think when I introduced the idea of legal operations early on, I was like, well, okay, how is that going to change? I think legal operations and e-discovery are synonymous with each other. And really now more than ever, I think everybody's got to work in partnership, and really excited for where the future is going to take us.